So this is our first of a whole new modality of Thursdays. So I know many of us have spent our Thursdays together for the last year or so at noon. Um, you know what? Is there someone who wouldn't mind being a co-host to let people in from the waiting room?
I'll co-host.
Okay, thank you. I am just adding in a few people, Angela and Sean. Thank you both. So we just finished Story of Us, which we spent literally a 1 day less than a year on, we realized. And Story of Us was very heady. It was very intellectual. It was very much about understanding and internalizing the big picture of the Jewish story, of who we've been, of who we've said we have been, maybe more particularly. This is really in the opposite direction. My hope with this group and this class every Thursday is that it really is going to be a spiritual practice workshop for us. We've called this HaDerech. I'll explain the title in a couple minutes, but literally it means the path. You know what? Actually, I'll just explain it now. There's sort of a phrase in the Orthodox world of people who were formerly Orthodox that they're called off the derech. Has anyone heard this phrase before?
Yes.
Right, like they're not a part of that world anymore. So I was sort of playing around with that as the title for what we're going to do. So I'm going to share a little bit about the mission for this class, the vision for this class, and a little bit of a personal piece of where this is coming from. So many of y'all know, many don't know. I'm going to share a little bit of a spiritual biography, and then we're going to turn it over and send you all into small groups and have you all share a little bit of a spiritual biography too. Many of you may know that before I was at CRC, I was working as a rabbi in a large conservative congregation in Cincinnati. In fact, Philip is here from that. Hi, Philip. So let me change this. Sorry, I'm changing this just a little for the stream. There we go. So sorry, these buttons are all over. There we go. So when we left from Peoria, where we'd been Reform rabbis for 5 years, to go to Cincinnati, we were already living a very traditional Jewish life, at least a conservative version of a traditional Jewish life, right? Capital C, conservative here. We were keeping Shabbos in a really traditional way. We were keeping kashrut in a really traditional way. I was wrapping tefillin regularly, right? Like so many of these markers of traditional Jewish life through a conservative lens were how we were living, so that when we became conservative rabbis, we didn't have to change anything about our observances. We fit right in. And I think this says something about my bad personality, maybe, but the moment it went from being something that I was choosing to do to being something that I had to do, there's this great Hebrew word called davka, which is, I think, this emotion right here. I started resenting it and really felt very different about this ritual life. It felt like it wasn't for me anymore. It was about being like a public exemplar of Jewish life. And it started to feel hollow. In many ways, this went along with a big spiritual crisis for me, with moving to this congregation and the election of Donald Trump and all sorts of these other pieces that go along with that. But eventually this sort of world of being conservative rabbis collapsed, and we ended up with about 6 months where they paid us not to work in exchange for a non-compete clause. But my ritual life disappeared. It totally collapsed. I started, in fact, I really enjoyed, again, this is that davka, bad emotion or bad person. I started really enjoying using their paychecks every week to go get dollar oysters at the bar, right? Like these are confessions of a rabbi, I guess, right here, right? But I went from having this very clear, articulated spiritual practice life to having almost nothing in my life that was a regular spiritual practice. And so that is the origin of this class for me, is I really, over the last few years, have been rebuilding a spiritual life sort of ad hoc here and there. But I'm really hoping to take a look at all of these different categories of Jewish living, to look at them in their traditional manifestations, to look at them in their contemporary manifestations, and talk about creative ways and traditional ways and all of these angles, and then try them on. And I'm really hoping that this will be a space where what will happen each week is that we will learn, and throughout the week, we will experiment. We will experiment with what these practices can look like in our own lives. And we'll come back together to process. So the example I keep giving is I'm really hopeful that as a part of this, when we get to the section on, for instance, kashrut, Jewish eating, right, ethical eating, what I'm really hoping is that there will be some of us who will really try on very traditional practices. People who will experiment with separating milk and meat, and waiting a certain amount of hours after they've eaten one before they eat, right? Really traditional sorts of things. And I'm hoping there will be people who will experiment with only eating ethically sourced bacon, right? Which is to say that there's no specific goal of what that ritual practice should look like for any of us. And one of the other real hopes is that this will be really a non-judgmental space for us to experiment and try on these sorts of things. Okay. Any thoughts or questions before we break up into small groups for a few minutes? Sarah, yep. You can just unmute yourself if you have thoughts, etc.
I just wanted to know if there's going to be sort of not a real strict syllabus, but something, so we know, oh, well, week X is going to be, we're going to discuss kashrut. Week Y, we're going to discuss chamotzi, and
exactly. So part of what we're going to do today is we're going to crowdsource the topics, the broad topics that we want to cover. And my thought is generally a topic we'll spend about a month on, would be the goal. Right. So we'll dive into ethical eating, kashrut, and really learn about it from all sorts of different angles, and experiment with it, and come back and talk about how we've experimented with it, and then move on to, blessings before eating, or Jewish ritual garb, or whatever that looks like, as the next topic, and cover that for about a month, if that makes sense. That'll definitely be the approach. Yep. And in terms of what we do with our hour together, we're definitely going to be breaking up into small groups. We're going to be processing. We're going to be really having space for personal work and internal work together as a collective. Yeah, Rudy.
What do we need to take away from this? I mean, what are we going to take away from this about ourselves?
Yeah, I love that question. We're going to do a little text study about that in a minute. But my real hope is that ritual can be a way for us to better live the version of ourselves that we want to be. Right. There's always this gap, I think, between the people we are and the lives we have lived, and the lives we imagine ourselves to live, or the values we imagine ourselves to have, or even just the image of ourselves we know we could become. And I really think that's the role of ritual when we do it right. Debbie.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, you titled this workshop Spiritual Practice, and you're talking about ritual right now. Are we going to be going beyond ritual to those things that we do in our lives to be able to connect us spiritually? Meditation, chant, other things that do connections for us, as opposed to ritual practices.
I'm very hopeful that those sorts of spiritual practices will be some of the ways that we will learn and experiment, and that people will try on. And that's what I mean by not just traditional modalities of practice, that I'm hoping we will be inspired by some of the values behind traditional practice and reinterpret those into our lives in meaningful ways. Yeah.
Question.
Okay. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Yeah, sorry. Steve and then Anita.
A trivial question. This meeting is being recorded. Are the smaller groups recorded also?
Smaller groups will not be recorded. Smaller groups will not be recorded. And this is not being broadcast on Facebook. It's really only being sent to our YouTube channel for a handful of folks who couldn't be here today. Yeah. This will, but none of the private conversations will be recorded. Anita.
Do you have an interest in connecting the practices to primary texts such as the Torah, explaining the thought behind connecting the theory to the application?
Yes, I think that's exactly what we're going to do. There definitely will be lots of texts that we'll be encountering and working through. And yeah, absolutely, Anita.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Can we record other weeks? I have a recurring conflict. Yes, my plan is to record it in much the same way, in a sort of private-ish way that people who are looking for it can go find it, but not in a way that's being sort of overtly broadcast for people to find, if that makes sense. Okay. So let's go ahead and start for today, shall we? So we only have one text that we're going to look at today. And then we're going to break up into some small groups. You know what? Actually, we're going to do that in the opposite order. I'm going to send you into small groups, and then we're going to look at this text. So here's your assignment in the small group. It's to give a spiritual biography of yourself in about 2 or 3 minutes, which I know can be really hard, right? Like 2 or 3 minutes to tell that kind of personal, vulnerable story, but just a biography of the journey, the ups, the downs. It can be like I talked about, it can be very different, whatever that looks like for you. So we're going to break into a few small groups right now. Where is the breakout room button? There we go. And we're going to aim for 3 to 4 people per group. Again, going for about 3 minutes each. Any questions on this assignment before we break up, though? Okay, we'll see y'all in 10-15 minutes.
3 minutes for each group, or 3 minutes for each person in the
Each
group?
person within your group. So each group, we're going to do about 12 minutes of this. So we'll be back at 12:35 or something. Okay, you should all have an invitation. These are totally random groups. And we'll see you soon. Ray and Debbie, you both should have links to join a breakout group. Let me know if you need help. If you sort of move your mouse around and look down at the bottom of the screen, there's probably a button. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Did you have enough time? I'm seeing yeses and nos.
No.
Daniel, can I ask a question?
Welcome back, everyone. Yeah, hold on one second, Paul. Show of hands. Did you have enough time?
Yes.
Ish. Okay, most of us. Good. Good. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Now, I'm not starting a controversy, but you used the word ethical when it came to kashrut. Is it unethical not to keep it?
Yeah, hold on to that question. I'm giving away something of the tech study we're going to do today. Yeah, hold on to that. That's a great question, Paul. And the relationship between ritual and ethics is exactly, I think, the point of what we're going to be doing on Thursday. Yeah, exactly. To Rhodey's point, non-judgmental as well. Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to take a moment to do just some spiritual centering after hopefully having been vulnerable in our sessions. The way I'm hoping we will start most of our Thursdays together, not today as our sort of introduction, but I'm hoping we will start with really some genuine spiritual practice. Who was it who was mentioning that earlier? Debbie. With a little bit of breath work, with a nigun at the beginning of each session, and maybe returning to it at the end. So I'm going to invite everyone for a moment. First of all, who here has had some sort of breath work practice before? Some of us have, some of us haven't. I personally have found it very transformative in my life to have that place to go to. So like you're getting your blood pressure taken, put both your feet flat on the floor if they're crossed, or if you're sitting some other way. Make sure to get yourself in an intentional kind of pose, whatever that feels like to you. Lift up your back or slouch down if slouching down is your approach. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a little bit of what's called 4-7-8 breathing. Is anyone familiar with this? We're going to breathe in for a count of 4. We're going to hold for a count of 7. We're going to breathe out for a count of 8. 4-7-8. We'll probably do 3 or 4 breaths this way. If you can, breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. My allergy season right now is not allowing that. Maybe I'll talk to Dr. Slavin later about that problem, but whatever way is comfortable for you. So this is both literal and spiritual. You can't start your breath in until first you exhale. So go ahead and let out your breath. And in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Continue on your own. In for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7. Out for 8. One more round at whatever your speed is. And feel free to keep breathing like that. I personally find whenever I am feeling anxious or utsy, if I just sort of stay within that practice, it makes a difference. And we're going to take a moment for a nigun. A nigun is really a Jewish idea of the same thing, I think. It's a wordless melody that we return to over and over again as we change through it. So this is a classical nigun that we're going to do. It's 3 parts with each part repeated. And it's a nigun that comes out of Yerushalayim, out of Jerusalem, by someone named Nathaniel Goldberg. So it goes like this. I invite you to keep breathing, to sing along if you're in a space that feels comfortable, but whatever feels right. So I'm hoping we'll have volunteers each week too. Other folks who will have nigunim that they'd be up for sharing, or sort of intentionalities that you'd like to share. If there's anyone who's up for doing it next week, please send me a message in the chat or something like that. Would love that. Okay, let's look at a text. Switch it so I can see all of your faces again. Sorry. Okay. This is the 3rd paragraph in the Shema. And I think it's one of the really confusing. Let me scroll down for those of you who'd like the English. There you go. I think a lot of times we come to this paragraph and we're really confused by it. When you look at the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, it begins with Via Hafta, the one we're probably the most familiar with, right? All about living our values at every moment of every day, when we are at home and when we are away, when we go out, when we come home, when we're with the people we know and love, when we're with strangers, right? Sometimes it's easier with strangers to be that best version of ourselves. we have the second paragraph of the Shema, famously removed by the Reform movement 100 plus years ago, that's all about reward and punishment for the observance or the non-observance of the commandments. It makes sense. It makes sense why this would be a part of this daily meditation done twice a day. But then we have this third paragraph, which I think feels like it comes out of nowhere sometimes. So let's go ahead and read this. Let's take it apart. Let's talk about what it's about. And it's really going to be in some ways, our mission statement for what we're going to do on Thursdays together. Okay. Anyone want to read the English for us? Go ahead and just.
Danny, could you enlarge it?
Yes, let me enlarge it. Let me see if it'll let me put the Hebrew and English next to each other. There we go.
Oh, cool.
Bobby, I
Oh my
think you can
gosh.
also enlarge it on your screen with your fingers. At least I can.
You can also, I'm putting the link in the chat if you'd rather just pull it in yourself.
And you can go up to view options and it'll say zoom ratio. You can control the size of it that way too. All right. Am I reading or
Please.
somebody else?
I think if you're up for it, you're up.
Sure. And Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them to make for themselves fringes on the corner of the garments throughout their generations. And they will place with the fringes of each corner a thread of blue."
Okay, pause for a second. What, like tachlis, what's being said here?
On the dress.
I heard someone's voice.
You're commanded to have tzitzit.
Tzitzit. Okay, that's what we call them, right? And that's the word in Hebrew too for fringes here. Tzitzit. Yep. What are tzitzit?
We're on the talus, and these are the rules of the talus. And then some gentlemen wear the tzitzits out over their chest, but this is the Saturday. The talus.
So the talus ends up coming from this practice.
Right.
But this is actually a more ancient tribal kind of thing that you have to go backwards to the way that folks used to dress, which was basically like a muumuu with a belt, right? Like a sheet with a hole cut in the middle of it that you put over your head and a belt around it, right? Which is to say that when you were dressed, your clothing had four corners on it.
Mhm.
Right? All of your clothing had four corners, or typically your clothing had four corners on it. And one of the markers of being a Jew would have been that these fringes would be on the four corners of your garb. So one of the sessions we're certainly going to do is we're going to talk about Jewish ritual dress and ways that we can try that on and incorporate it, and all sorts of different things, kippot and talitot and all sorts of different practices. But it used to be a part of all of our dress, and it then becomes an optional thing, right? You have to wear a special four-cornered garment in order to fulfill this mitzvah. Okay, keep going, please.
Well, Sarah Heyman wanted to discuss the color blue. So you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yes. Let's put that on hold. We'll come back to it. There was this tradition that there be a blue thread put in the corner, put in each of the corners, each of the fringes. It disappeared for the better part of a few thousand years and has recently come back into fashion. And we'll talk about that with some controversy too. But yeah.
Rabbi Danny, can I ask you a question too?
Please.
It's one of the Sarahs. When it says like the children of Israel, the Bnei Yisrael, I mean, Bnei is masculine plural, right? But it doesn't specifically exclude women, right?
Correct. Right. I think that's a really important point. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, like so many gendered, fundamentally sexist language is the masculine plural in Hebrew is the default universal plural. That's starting to change, by the way. There's all sorts of linguistic activists in Israel that are doing amazing work on these sorts of things in non-binary Hebrew. And I know we've done some of that, and maybe we'll talk about that in one of our sessions too. But okay, let's keep going. Let's keep reading this.
"And it will be to you for fringes, and you will look upon it, and you will remember all the commandments of Adonai, and you will perform them, and you will not turn aside after your hearts and after your eyes, which cause you to go astray. in order that you will remember and perform all my commandments, and you will be holy unto your God.
Okay,
I
let's
am
pause.
Adonai.
Okay, what just happened here? What's going on? There's a backstory clearly that goes to this text.
Apparently, these people were turning aside a lot and doing what they wanted instead of what God wanted them to do.
Yeah. So what is the specific image that's happening here? What is someone doing wrong?
Not following the commandments.
Okay,
And
but even more specifically, I think we've got a very specific setup
Worshipping
here.
idols.
Worshiping idols.
Are we the golden calf? Is that when this comes?
No,
Okay.
those things sometimes become connected. Yeah. I think what we're seeing here.
I'm looking Jewish enough.
You're not looking Jewish enough. There you go, Leon. Yeah.
That's the point that I'm picking up is in
Don't worry, Leon, you'll pass.
In the context of today, with all the anti-Semitism that seems to be oozing from wherever, it seems kind of weird to say this from a Gentile, but in other words, let's make sure that we can identify each other.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I think that's absolutely here, Philip, right? Like there's a dress code.
And I think moreover, it's a public one, as opposed to, let's say, circumcision, which is usually hidden by the clothes.
Right. Let's hope so. No,
well, for an ancient Greek, like, and you, you went to the arena or to the gymnasium and you did your exercise
houses,
and
everybody knew whether you were Jewish or not.
Yeah.
If you were male.
So I think there's another story behind this. I love all of these reads, by the way. Hold on, Steve. Be there. I love all of these reads. And I think this is a really important value that we're pulling out about ritual too, right? Ritual is not just about us as individuals. It is also a language that we build community with. But I think there's a backstory here. I think if you read between the lines, what's happening is there is someone who is undressing themselves to engage in an illicit sexual relationship. And they're in the process of doing this. And they look down and they see the tzitzit and they say,
wait a minute.
This isn't what I'm supposed to do. Do we see that? Do folks see that now? The translation here has massaged it a little bit. Sometimes it will not cause you to go astray, in your lust will sometimes be included in the translation, which I think brings that out a little bit more. Certainly I can see the idol read too, right? That this language is often used for idolatry. But I think we're talking about a individual engaged in inappropriate behavior who stops themselves because of these tzitzit. I think that's the story we're getting here.
But it's not just the individual stopping themselves, because it's a sign to the other people, to the, to go, oh, wait, you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to come into this temple. You're not supposed to engage in this ritual. You don't belong to us. So, yeah.
Yeah. All these levels. Thanks, Renee. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, there's kind of like, when you're learning how to drive and they say the thing that you focus on is what you steer towards. And when it's saying you will not turn aside after your hearts and after your eyes, which cause you to go astray. So instead of going like, ooh, my neighbor's wife, what a hottie, you see the tzitzit, and that becomes what you steer towards.
Yeah.
And I think, like you were talking about remembering at services the other day, Rabbi Dan, and it's the Zachor that they're using in here, right? Which there was, I apologize, I'm going to try to be speedy. There was a lovely podcast I heard on a French Jewish thing a while ago, and they were contrasting Zachor and Shamor. And they were saying that Zachor, I think, is like a more active way of remembering. It's like a performance.
Let me just interrupt quickly. Zachor and Shamor are the two verbs that are traditionally used to refer to Shabbat practice. And one of the explanations for why there's two Shabbat candles that you light is that there are these two verbs. And in fact, occasionally you will see Shabbat candlesticks where like one of them will say Shamor on it and the other will say Zachor on it. So yeah, sorry, Sarah, please keep going.
Oh, sorry. I can share the text. I have the translation at some future point if people are interested, but I didn't know there was more than one verb for remembering in Hebrew. And this podcast was saying that one of them is like an internal action and one is like an external performative action where we like do something. But I don't know, I just took the seat as like you steer towards what you're looking at. And so you can always look down and be reminded, this is who I want to be. It's like the pieces of paper that the Sunday school kids were talking about with
the two. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, there was another comment, I think, somewhere. Steve,
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, the great thing about this workshop is it's a spiritual workshop. So every answer is technically correct. The spirit of
There you go.
Judaism, it's all over the place, right? So the one thing that connects it all is the spirit, right?
Nice. So, and Sarah, I see your hand. I'll be there in one moment. So I want to return back to this other read for a moment of this text. This read of this text as being about this very specific moment, right? Where someone is about to behave in a way that is not the person they want to be. And tzitzit are used as that reminder, right? I think this is the role that it plays in the Shema, that we have these 3 paragraphs, right? We first have this statement of the oneness of the divine, the Shema itself. We have V'ahavta talking about living the best of these values at every moment of every day. We have V'haya talking about reward and punishment for the observance and the non-observance of these commandments. It makes sense. And then we get to tzitzit, which doesn't seem to fit. And I think the answer is this is what ritual should be. That when we do it right, rituals should be there to keep us on the path of who we want to be.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really the thesis and the goal and the mission and the vision and whatever other jargony words we want to throw in there of what we're going to do on Thursdays, which is we are going to look for ways within our own lives of using Jewish ritual practice to help us be the people that we want to be and to live the lives that we want to live, which is to say the intersection between ritual, spiritual practice, and ethical living. Which brings me back to Paul's question before, where I sort of offhand talked about kashrut as being ethical eating. I would never suggest, Paul, that keeping kosher is more ethical than not keeping kosher. I would suggest that following the values that underlie kashrut lead to a more ethical life than not following them. Now, I think that in lots of ways, and we're going to look at these, there are lots of ways in which kashrut practice today goes against the values of kashrut. For instance, these days, kosher slaughter of animals is often significantly crueler than non-kosher slaughter of animals, when for the better part of thousands of years, it was exactly the opposite, and the whole value behind it was the opposite. We'll explore some of those things. Okay, this was a lot, I know. So for future weeks, we're going to start with some breaths. We're going to start with a nigun. We'll generally start at about 12:05 so that folks can kibitz beforehand and join as they do. And so we can really enter into the breathing and the nigun space collectively. And then we will jump into our topics. So with our last few moments together, oh, Sarah, I'm sorry, please go ahead. I
was going to talk about the color blue because it's about intentionality. Blue is a difficult color to fabricate. I'm not even sure how they made blue in where they were. It's not readily observable and fabricatable. And so it was a big sacrifice to make blue threads. And so you had to go through this huge thing to produce it. Like I said, I know something about pigments and such, and it's not even in some cultures, you don't even see blue. It's not part of the language. And so this calling out blue is not like it's just any color and you have
Nice.
or not
Nice.
colored. It's like you actually have done this as an intention to mark yourself as a Jew, to do a very Jewish thing.
So to add to that, thank you, Sarah, with what I think is a sort of really fitting additional value for all of us. Hi, Olson. Sorry, make sure you see Angela's screen right now with little baby Olson. There's a line in the Mishnah that talks about what do you do if you can't afford the blue because it was so expensive? And the answer becomes that the harder a mitzvah is to fulfill, the less important it is. That the easier a mitzvah is for you to fulfill, the more important it is. So they specifically talk about it that for a wealthy person, having blue in their talus is an incredibly important mitzvah. And for someone who's impoverished, it's almost like it doesn't exist. Which I hope will also be one of our approaches, right? Sometimes we take the opposite view that it's the difficult things that have the most value. I think sometimes it's the pieces we can really integrate into our lives, which have that value. Yeah, Ray.
Isn't there a story, Daniel, about a snail in the Mediterranean?
Yes, that's
that
true.
produces the blue dye?
Yes, and there's all sorts of theories about what particular snail, and there's some people who believe
It's
that they've
purple. It's not a
discovered
blue.
it. And
Anybody who has had a little Greek history, they have the snail also.
Right,
So
but it's
just
a
all over
purple.
the place. Yeah. So
okay, we are at 1 o'clock. I want to be respectful of that hour mark for folks. My thought is that we would start with ethical eating kashrut. Is that something of interest to folks that we'll spend about a month on, and we'll look at the values, really delve into the values? Is there anyone who would like to do our nigun or intentionality or poem or something or set piece for next week? Any volunteers for that? Renee?
Do you know something called the negative nigun? Have you ever heard of that? Okay, it's a 3-part nigun, very beautiful. Could be done in unison or as a round.
Okay, you're up for next week then.
Okay.
And we'll start and end with it. So speaking of that, we will end with our same nigun. Invite you to put the feet back flat, take a few breaths. If you need to hop off, if you have something exactly at 1, I do have something at 1, but my meeting is right here. Hi, Debbie. So actually, Debbie, we can just stay in this Zoom after everyone leaves. A couple breaths, 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. I'm not going to count them this time because I'm going to do them myself. When you're ready, I encourage you to drop off the Zoom and to hopefully take a moment, 2 moments, 3 moments for a few more breaths before you return to whatever else is left for you the rest of this day.
Rabbi Daniel.
Daniel, do you have a few minutes after you speak with Debbie or any time this afternoon? I would like to speak to you about something.
Absolutely, Renee.
Okay, can I just call you on your
Just call me on my cell. You've got that number?
266, that number?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I'll try you later. Okay. Thanks.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you, everybody, and Daniel.
Everybody.
Thank you.